Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world. A couple of weeks out from Christmas, so decided to do a very limited edition, one-off Christmas EI would agree. And I decided I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to do it or not this time round. I was unsure. It's a bit close to Christmas. Diaries are already full. Will anybody turn up? And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull out the big hitter. I'm going to pull out the guy that kind of sold our first pilot episode for the business, and we did really well with it. We got lots and lots of engagement, and here he is back to join us again, Mr. Lee Bovington, the first person I've had on twice on the show. Good to have you back, Lee.
That's a compliment, right?
Absolutely. You wouldn't be back a second time if it were boring.
No, it's great to be here, mate. Good to be part of it as well. No, I love it.
Good to have you on board. How's your Christmas preparations going? Are you almost there?
Yeah, almost there, mate. Yeah, we're just talking about the weather as well, just mild and just strange. But yeah, from a retail perspective, everyone's as per normal. So the stores are busy, especially in Nike at the moment. Retailers are kind of anxious, but our store teams are anxious at the same time. But no, it's all good. How about you? Things been all right?
Yeah, good. It's been a really, really strong end to the year for us as well. I think I kind of expected to hit the 1st of December and everybody just go, I don't want to have meetings now. Let's just, it's nearly Christmas. Because that's what happened last year, right? Last year I got to December and just nobody wanted to talk. But then, you know, if you think back to where we were this time last year, I think like lockdown had been released was it the back end of November? So everybody had like 2 weeks worth of shopping to get in. So things were a slight bit different last year. I think everybody just took early holidays. I think this year everybody's a lot more work focused this year, and yeah, so lots of interesting conversations going on. So yeah, like give everybody the background for where this conversation came from. I wasn't sure what I was doing, and then me and Lee were having a bit of a catch up, and Lee got talking about his favourite subject, which is coaching. And what really interested me, Lee, was when you were talking around. Obviously, you're the EMEA loss prevention manager for Nike, and I know Nike themselves, and I'd be good to hear a little bit about this as well. Is like I know you've got a strong storytelling culture within the business, and that's kind of promoted from within. But I'm just curious, like, do you want to give us a bit of an understanding of like how wide your remit is within Europe, so you can get an idea for how tough that is or how easy that is? I guess depends on your angle on it.
Yeah, I've been in the business for just over 3 years now, and I look after a chunk of Europe that is, I would say, is very diverse in an amazing way, which is what that's all about. Very culturally rich, and we've got people that work for us across a variety of different countries, and they are true to their culture, which is amazing. That makes my job difficult and so rewarding at the same time, and I mean that genuinely, because that's why I came to the organisation, especially to that role, to have that experience. To coaching's coaching, and you get to a point where you want to try something different and just get a different kind of level of testing of yourself. Every day is a school day. You've heard me say that a million times. And how can we get the message across different cultures? So for someone that's that lives and works and is born and raised in Italy, can I use the same style of coaching than I would use in the UK or France, for example? So that for me was the massive new learning curve. And yeah, you make mistakes along the way, right? Life's about making mistakes and learning from them. So we got to a point where you have to go through that journey, and yeah, it's been fascinating, and it will always be continual. There's not an end date to this. It will never stop and say, right, that's it, I've finished. I can now enable myself to coach thoroughly across different European cultures and languages and beliefs and religions, etc. It's continual, it's ongoing. Again, that's the fascinating piece for me, and that's the real engaging piece for me, is to be able to do that and experience that, and to see people grow. And I will probably speak about it in a while. But someone asked me recently about my role. I was doing some mentoring with some people, and the lady asked me about my role and what I do, and she asked me a really good question about, you know, what is it that I'm trying to do in simple terms. And for me, it's not just about numbers. Numbers drive performance, numbers pay the bills. But for me, it's about watching and seeing people grow if they want to. Similar to one of the questions you posed on LinkedIn about coaching, but it's being able to see that for me is the proud moment. So yeah, it's like I said, it's not finished. This is just part of an ongoing journey. And when we move through teams, teams will change, teams will grow, teams will move internally and externally from the business. But it's been able to see people grow and to sit back and be part of that growth, not to own it, not to be to say that that's me, I've done that, but just to be part of that person's growth to enable them to be what they want to be. That's the fascinating part for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when we originally first started speaking, I was very much focused specifically on retail analytics in a more sort of store operational capacity. And as my roles evolved and our business has evolved, and kind of gone more towards the contact center and customer services side of things. And I've said it before, the more time I spend in that environment working with people from contact centers, the more I realise that retail and contact centers are very much aligned in terms of cross-functional learning that you can take between industries, and a very similar sort of environment, very time pressure, very high workload. If you've got downtime, you're probably doing something wrong, right? And again, we work with a lot of outsourcers and BPOs where there are like a huge mix of cultures, language barriers, lots of teams spread disparately throughout the world, not just within the UK, but you can have that even within the same contact center, people from lots of different backgrounds sat within one team or multiple teams. So I think that's where my brain originally went with the conversation, was like, wow, there's another sort of parallel that can draw between that retail world on one side and the contact center world on the other. And to be good at coaching, and again, we should talk about coaching in general. I think your style probably lends itself more towards the facilitated self-coaching style, sort of encouraging people to get the best out of them that they can, come to it their own, through their own processes, and encouraging, like, teasing that progress out of them bit by bit and finding their why. We probably approach it from the slightly different angle of the performance management side of things, but again, with the same semantics as to, how can you use human-led coaching? Like, how can you forget about the data? Like people tend to focus too much on, you start to look at performance-led coaching, people worry about the data, worry about the reports, my metrics, my figures. And we kind of approach that from the point of view where we try and take away that concern. Let us find the metrics, let us find the things that you should be talking to people about. You focus on having the conversations with your people. But I think there's those conversations that that's not always the easiest thing for people to do, especially when there's like a language barrier there.
100%.
I think, you guys have got a big US, obviously you've got a big US part of the business, and then you've got the European side of the business. What do you think in terms of, like, I guess being part of Europe for so many years, we kind of understand the dynamics of Europe much better. Do you think that understanding is generally there from the US side of things in terms of the different cultures that are there within the European communities?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that's I've been lucky enough to work for two organisations that have kind of the mothership in the US, for want of a better phrase. And first of all, I would say they want to. So they want to. There's a genuine want and desire to understand Europe. So that's positive from the outset, because without that, you would struggle in general. But again, I would say it's ongoing. It's ongoing because that stakeholder, in my opinion, needs to be boots on the ground in that country to feel it. And again, it sounds quite cheesy, because they need to feel and understand the culture, because everything is different. And again, I'm lucky in my tenure in LP retail over the last 18 plus years to spend the last 6 years learning and understanding and being part of it. So it means getting there. You can't learn it from here. You can't learn it from a Teams call or a Zoom call. You have to be in that environment, and you have to speak to people. So you have to invest your time. It's all of these things. So you know, and again, it's not just visiting a site, visiting a store. It's about meeting people.
Yeah.
And it's about, to your point, it's about having those conversations, not about work, just genuine conversations about what's it like. What's it like living in Barcelona? What are the people like? What's the food like? What's the atmosphere like? What's the vibe like? What is it like? And I kind of learned that a while ago, but I didn't realize when I worked in a previous organization where one of the senior leaders of the business was talking about when he goes to stores to meet people. And I thought, wow, that is just it, because you go to places to meet people. So it's about, take your work hat off. You go into that environment to meet people. And if you are genuinely invested in understanding and adapting, streamlining, going faster or going slower with your strategy, you have to have those conversations. You have to speak. You can't be hierarchical and only speak to the store leaders. You have to speak to people. You have to have a conversation in the coffee shop with the barista and speak to them. You have to get an insight, because if you don't, then you're going in blind, and you're going in with a preconceived idea of what you read in the book, with the great respect, or what you've Googled or what you've read somewhere else. Yeah, you have to spend that quality time. And for me, that's the start. And again, it's the flip of that is culturally. Certain cultures, if they see that you are interested, and if they see that you are genuinely invested in them, then straight away you're on a positive, and straight away that's a win. So that's what I've learned and still continue to learn. So you have to be genuine, and you have to have those normal conversations with people. And yes, you can go out to restaurants, and yes, you can go to a football match, and that kind of stuff. And that's really important. But you have to be genuine and show up in the right way.
Yeah, that's great. It's great advice. I love it. Just while we're talking here as well, guys, we are live on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if anybody's got any questions that you'd like to ask myself or Lee, feel free to ask them in the comments. We do get to see them. If there's anything that's juicy there, I'll bring it up on screen. We'll have a conversation around it. So I'd love to have some participation from anybody who's watching the show this week. It's a special for you guys. That I don't do the LinkedIn lives for my benefit. Like, I do it to try and help drive people forward. And if anybody's got any questions that I'd like to ask the people on the show, feel free. It's an open floor to people. I think some really interesting points to unpack there, Lee. And I think a lot of it stems from being curious. You know, if you're not a curious person, you will struggle as a leader. And you can be curious about process, you can be curious about people, and that's how you kind of end up finding your own niche, I guess. What's interesting for me is that I find that, like, you know, a lot of salespeople are naturally quite curious. You have to be in sales. You have to understand what it is about your customer that makes them want what it is that you're offering. And I think that kind of lends itself really well to retail, which makes me wonder whether, if in different circumstances, and I've made this jump myself, kind of, you know, are people from retail and sales predisposed to being able to work quite well in each industry because of that curiosity? Is that something that you think is a good indicator of leadership qualities?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and again, I speak from me. So yeah, it's in and I think I've always used the phrase being curious with various areas of LP. One of the biggest ones was around internal investigations, where we say to our store leaders, look, if you don't hear anything from us, just be curious. If you're not sure, ask someone, and let us know. But yeah, I think there is. For me, it started off in my early career in the police, where, you know, it's obvious, but you were curious, and so you had to ask the questions. You had to get that picture in your head. What happened? Did anybody see anything? How did it happen? Etc. 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 So for me, I'm I don't know what the technical phrase is, but I like to see the idea in my head, and then it sinks in, and then I'm able to explain it. So I need to see the A to Z. If I don't know the A to Z, then I kind of stumble my way through being able to explain it to anybody. And again, that just eats into credibility. So I think that there is. And again, if you're a great salesperson, then I've never done any kind of selling myself, but I've been the victim of selling. And what do they do when they knock at your door, or they ring your phone, or you see them face to face? They try to be, and some are genuinely invested in you as a person. So there's small talk. There is that kind of wedding reception small talk that you can see work and you can see not work. And where I've had great partners and great vendors and great relationships. And again, listening back to what I just said a few minutes ago, that's because the engagement was genuine. It wasn't just wishy-washy. They kind of done a little bit of research, and they done a little bit of homework. We're not talking about stalking, but they done a little bit of research, a little bit of homework, and they understood how someone was, and they was able to hold a conversation. So if you're able to hold that conversation with someone and it's genuine and it's flowy, then that's great, because it is just like, a relationship or a friendship. When you meet someone for the first time, to be able to hold that genuine, relaxed, normal, engaging conversation that just flows backwards and forwards, that is where the magic happens, in my opinion.
I think to a certain extent, I think some of that comes from just not being afraid of the outcome. I think if you're doing the role for the right reasons and knowing that you're benefiting the people that you're speaking to, the outcome becomes irrelevant. I have a lot of what you could class as sales conversation. Sales is a dirty word, let's be honest. Like, for a lot of people, sales is a dirty word. And I don't think it needs to be. I mean, everybody sells every day. Everybody, whether it's, within your own household, to your friends, to your family, you're selling yourself, you're selling what you can help them with, you're selling your thoughts, your opinions on things, your counsel. So everybody kind of thinks that sales is this horrible, dirty thing. It's not. It's just the art of helping people understand your point of view and engage in their interest, building rapport with them. So yeah, I love that. Thanks, Lee. We've actually got a really interesting question from Inga. So she says she wants to know how you deal with people who are scared of change. I think that's something we can all appreciate. Like, I think change is something that, as human beings, we're all naturally averse to. Very few people relish change in everyday life. So what's the key to getting the most unwilling members of your team? Let's go at the extreme. What's the most unwilling members of your team? How do you get them to respond to the change?
Yeah, that's a great question, Inga. No one likes change, right? No one likes it. It's a standing joke with me at the moment and colleagues. I've got a brand new Mac laptop, and I don't want to use it because I don't like change, because I'm not sure what to do when it doesn't work. So I will only use it when I'm next to a colleague who's got their MacBook open, so we can share. So that we're all human. That's how my brain works at the same time. But no, back to the question. I would say, and again, having had these conversations in the past, is to be able to, and that sounds quite cheesy, but it's true. Sometimes the answers are the simplest ones. Is just to speak to that person, to really understand what is it that they're scared of. What is it that that they are really petrified of, whatever this change is? Have they got the wrong end of the stick? Is it because the message wasn't clear? Is it because the timescales are unrealistic? Is it because the communication methodology for that person to know was bad? So a leader just says, "Look, we're going to restructure. We'll let you know in 6 months' time. Thanks, bye." That's a big, scary change process. So it's about, do we need to be informed, or do we just need to be do we need to be told when the time comes? So I think, and again, my advice is to be able to deal with those people by being genuine. And the conversation for me is all about not just the words you use, and this is my experience from the past. It's about where you have that conversation. Do you have that conversation in the car park, in the car, or do you have it in a sterile office where it petrifies that individual even more, because you're being called to an office and it's clean and sterile, and that's where investigations normally have? Or do you have it in a coffee shop, or over a beer, or over a cocktail, or over dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever? That for me makes a difference, because straight away that puts that person at ease. And if you are completely honest with them and say, you know, again, from a structural perspective, one of my senior leaders said to me, look, there's going to be some change, Lee. It's going to be quite big. I can't tell you much, but I'll let you know when it's going to happen. And for me personally, all right, get it, fine, understood, completely get it, that's fine, works for me. For other people, it might not, but it's about having that genuine conversation with that person and asking them what is really making them scared. Because for me, one of the barometers in business where people are kind of fearful of change is if it's affecting them. If it's affecting them physically and mentally, then for me, that's a big red flag. Stop. Something isn't right. Let's have that genuine heart-to-heart conversation with that person. Hope that helps, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think, you know, I had a conversation with Simon Norrie a couple of weeks back. I don't know whether you caught that one or not, Lee, but one of the things that Simon's a big believer in is that change isn't driven by the business. Change is driven by the people. And the moment you forget that, then your change is going to fail. You know, there is ultimately always a business need behind the change. That's fine. You know, there should be a business strategy. There should be, you know, a top level discussion. But what people quite often forget to do is to involve the people at the very bottom end of that change. Understand how it's going to impact them, first of all, before you have any conversation with anyone. Fully understand it, genuinely understand it, and then talk to them about that change and help them understand why it's necessary, what they're going to get out of it, and get them to buy into the change before it even happens. And so many times I've seen that change happen, and it's almost the conversation about buy-in happens as a result of something coming off and going wrong somewhere. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have some change, and this is what the change is. We're going to have a complete new procedure, and it's going to happen. Well, we've already started it. I'm going to tell you about it now. How does that make you feel? Like I wasn't even important enough to be told about the change. And it's not intentional, right? Like, you know, you've got so many levels of leadership within some businesses that, you know, it's inevitable that the message gets diluted as it goes down. And for me, that's why it's important to have that connection from the top right to the bottom, to your point, to be able to walk in the shoes, to be able to have, you know, go into stores and have those conversations, go into the workplace and have those conversations. And you talk in call centers, they try and err away from the title floor walkers, right? But I think you could take a positive spin on that name, right? Like remove what the floor walker was known for and going up to people and bullying them to get the job done, but actually just walking the floor and checking people are okay and checking in on them and getting a level of understanding on different initiatives.
It's got to be genuine, and that's I've probably said that word about 60 times so far. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be heartfelt, and again, there's different levels of confidentiality with business change, but be as transparent as you can be. Don't hold back, because think about how that person, again, my view, going on a tangent, think about how that person feels. Do you want them to drive home upset and annoyed and take it home with them? Of course we don't. Of course we don't. That should never be the intention. And if that does start to happen, again, massive red flag. Something hasn't gone right. So be as genuine and be as transparent as you can with those messages. And at the end of the day, after that, if the change is the change, then it is what it is. But you've been as honest and upfront and as transparent as you can be with that particular process, because people talk and people's phones will be ringing and WhatsApp groups will be pinging, and you know, let's not be silly that we don't underestimate that. Let's be as open and honest and upfront as we can. Let's be as fair as we can. Let's be as human as we can. Let's be as kind as we can, because we are dealing with peoples. We are dealing with people with livelihoods and families and emotions, especially nowadays, right? Because it's a really tough place out there, with everything going on. So we need to be very, very cognizant of that.
Those WhatsApp groups that we definitely don't have, because we don't allow them to exist. We all know for a fact that they exist behind the scenes, and all we do is push them in the
of course. I'll encourage it, but that's great communication. I'll encourage it, and I've seen some leaders say, oh, yeah, the team have got a WhatsApp group. They're talking. Brilliant. We're not going to try and stop. You know, that's great. They're talking. As long as we are transparent as we can, as we are as genuine as we can, as long as we are as fair as we can, then it is what it is. We shouldn't stop our teams talking amongst themselves.
It's just like Iona says there, listen to understand, not listening to respond. You're not listen to what your people are saying for the right goal, not just to say that you can tick a box to say that you've listened to them, so you can then move on.
100%. Yeah, that's 100%. And again, the some of these are simple solutions, but they're tried and tested simple solutions. So, and again, back to the original topic about cross-cultural coaching. It's all about being a part of it, but a big part of it is about being a great listener. And listen. So I've got a lady in my team, Anna. She's amazing. Anna lives and looks after our Spanish areas of Nike stores. And naturally, being genuinely Spanish, Anna speaks fast. That's just how it is. So when I first had, and she wouldn't mind me sharing, when one of our first interactions, Anna was speaking really fast, and what did I try to do? I tried to slow her down. It's not going to work. I guess that doesn't happen. That's just not how it works. I understood that very, very quickly. So what did I have to do? I had to just adapt my coaching style and listen more and listen to what she was saying, but also again be very cognizant of the fact that English wasn't and isn't and shouldn't be her first language. It's not a mother tongue. Her mother tongue was Spanish. So I've got to take all of those things into consideration and be a great listener. Allow her to vent, allow her to speak fast, and then understand what it is during that conversation that she needs help, support, or guidance with, or she just needs to get off her chest. So that for me was a fascinating introduction to that particular culture.
Awesome. Great story. Thanks for sharing it. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna. You're amazing.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, Lee. We're coming up to the end of the show at past. And we've got a couple of questions to get through before then. So I'm going to quickly pause these up. Great question by Rob. As relationships the foundation, the common interests give a reason to start. But in your experience, how do you find the best way of allocating your time to allow for growing those relationships? I think, it's easy to get lost in your day-to-day routine. It's easy to get focused on the procedures. How do you fit in building those relationships around that? Or do you build your day around the relationships, I guess, is the other way of looking at it. Is it one way or the other?
Yeah, and again, if apologies, Robert, if I understand the question correctly, one of the things that I do myself is to spend time outside of the working environment. So again, I'm lucky to work for an organisation like Nike that allows that invested time to understand how people work, what makes them tick. It's not just about what did you do at the weekend? Did you have a nice weekend? It's about understanding them as a person. And the more you get to understand them as a person, be it speed reaching, I'm sure people have done that course on this call, that really helps. And then you start to build that relationship, because everybody, as we know, everybody that we interact with is going to be different, because that's the beautiful world that we live in. So it's about understanding that individual. And again, it's about being humble as well, right? So it's not just one way. It's about being humble and sharing experiences and storytelling from experience and sharing your experience to enrich that person and to broaden their horizons. But it's just about having that normal conversation. Some businesses call it difficult conversations, meaningful conversations. For me, it's just, look, life's too short, right? Let's just have a conversation. Let's just talk and see where it takes us. And again, that for me is one of the key building blocks for building and growing those relationships. And again, it's tough. It's time, right? It's tough. In the world that we live in on Zoom calls and stuff, it's tough because we'd like to do it face to face. So we have to find the next best thing.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to take my own take on that, so I spend quite a lot of time networking, a lot of time speaking to a lot of different people. And it would be very easy for me to get swept away in that and spend all of my time doing that, as opposed to actually actively looking for business opportunities, which is the other half of my job. It's the main part of my job, right? So I think for me, it's almost like having a shrub that's growing out of the ground, and you've got all these different branches growing off it. And it's about identifying where the main branches are that can either assist you, or you can really assist them in where they're going, and pruning off the smaller branches that maybe aren't as helpful, that you don't have a direct connection to, getting to understand the strength of that relationship first, and keeping that shrub nicely pruned so that you can spend the time that you need to on the people that matter, either to yourself or, if you matter to them. I think there's key players. If you can look at a retail perspective, there are key people within each store. It's not necessarily the management team. There are people who have a lot of sway within each business, within each store, within each function, and to an extent, they're the people that you connect with and need to have that relationship with first and foremost. But it's an ongoing process, but it's definitely hard to manage the time balance between the two. I think it is valid.
It is. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but again, just one of the, we've all worked for amazing leaders. And we look at those, but some of the most amazing leaders that I've ever worked with, there's a common thread across all of them. They're just nice people. No more complex than that. They're down to earth, nice people, and they're very transparent. You can have a beer with them, you can have a glass of wine or a soft drink, whatever takes your fancy, but they're just nice people.
Yeah, that's fair. And then one last question before we get finished, for the last show before Christmas. Comes from last week's guest, Marianne. Hi. So agree with you completely on the transparency, and that's the heart of their company. But what percent of companies do you think actually work in that way? How many companies do you think are actually transparent? So it's great to talk about transparency, and it's a great ideal, I think, is the way we've probably talked about it. But do you think first of all, two sides to that, then I'll change it slightly. What do you think that's a common practice right now? And do you think that progress for transparency is being accelerated by what we've all gone through?
I would hope to think so. Again, I doubt very much, and maybe there's been a study on this, but I don't know. There's not going to be numbers, right? To be fair, tongue in cheek. But my response is there should be more. Okay, so there should be, and this is about business being. Everyone has cultures and values, right? But is it just stuck on the wall and done in Q1 and forgot about for the rest of the year in some organisations, or is it kept alive? Do we live it and breathe it? Is it demonstrated by a leadership team, which is what everybody looks to when they see that as example? Because as I've heard before, behaviour breeds behaviour, but definitely not enough organisations out there. And sometimes those organisations may just be comfortable in churning through those employees, and the attrition rates are high, which for me is always one of the key indicators of business, is how people move for the organisation, bar exit interviews that are sometimes done or sometimes not. But that for me is key, but definitely not enough. But again, I'm lucky enough to work in an organisation. This isn't a plug for Nike, I promise. But I'm lucky enough to work in this organisation that is and has been, and I think will always be, the most transparent organisation in my experience that I've worked for in retail so far. So when change happens, it grows because the business sheds new skin, and because of the natural growth of the organisation and for what our consumer needs. Nike leads by example, and Nike does demonstrate the cultures and values and what we see. That helps, because if we see it and it's common, it's a theme, then everyone else goes along for the ride.
Fantastic! What a great way to end the conversation. Lee, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you everybody for contributing, asking questions. It's always much more engaging when there's questions.
Yeah, great questions, people.
Hopefully we've done our side of things and answered them in a way that makes sense to you all. Feel free to strike up conversations. If anybody hasn't met Lee, feel free to send him a message on LinkedIn. He's always open and responsive, as long as you're not spamming him. Back to that sales thing again.
Don't try and sell me anything.
And everybody who's watching, whether you're watching live, you're watching this back, hopefully this isn't the first one of my series that you've seen, that AI would agree. Hopefully you've seen some of the others. If you haven't, have a look on my profile, get back and watch some of the other ones. Some fantastic interviews and conversations going on. And look forward to seeing you all again in the new year, where, and I'll be announcing it tomorrow, we've got a special celebrity guest to kick off the new year as well. So very interesting conversation to be had in January. I hope you all have a fantastic Christmas or holiday period, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Lee. Take care. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Thanks, people. Bye-bye.